I've always wanted this channel to be a way of sharing the things that I am passionate or have a love for, or even just things that I find strange. Marlon Brando has always been my favourite, and in my opinion, the greatest screen actor that's ever lived. The physicality and the sensitivity of Marlon Brando is probably best shown in my favourite of all his films, probably my favourite film of all time, On the Waterfront. Within that film, he is vulnerable, he is strong, he is weak, he is ugly, he is undeniably real and surrounded by a wonderful cast with incredible writing and fantastic direction. It is one of the greatest screen performances of all time. Quotable moments, but just real passion and depth. You know, this could also be seen, that this sort of rough sexuality could also be seen as well in A Streetcar Named Desire. And even though we're talking of a period of time from maybe the late 40s up to the early 80s where we see Marlon Brando's motivating factor being the quality of his acting and a real passion for the craft. After that, maybe money and celebrity and things like that maybe got in the way. But if you're looking at picking out roles and performances, he's so magnetic and such a powerful actor that he really does draw you in. The superstardom of Marlon Brando is not to be forgotten. Many people had this idea of doing a wonderful, quote-unquote, wonderful Stanley Kowalski or Marlon Brando impression based upon his role in A Streetcar Named Desire. There's even cartoons where people are doing voices and impressions of him. He was a celebrity through to the quality of his acting. There's that wonderful story about James Dean seeing Marlon Brando take off his coat, roll it up and throw it in the corner, and the next time that James Dean went to a party he did the same thing. So there's a generation of young men who wanted to be like Marlon Brando, wanted to act like him, and to a certain degree those people who follow the James Dean style, who maybe saw some early James Dean films like Giant or Rebel Without a Cause, they might not even realise that they're performing in a style that was perfected by Marlon Brando in The Wild One or something like that, which really made acting seem cool and tough and physical in a way that appealed to young men, that you're still kind of seeing in the way people act now. It even appealed to the way Elvis acted in some of his early films. Marlon Brando is someone who has always stood out for me as almost a physical force. He broke his nose in rehearsals on stage for A Streetcar Named Desire when his understudy Jack Palance gave him a broken nose. So these things that that Brando did weren't half-hearted. It wasn't really Hollywood that lured him away. It was the idea of artistic freedom. He loved being on stage, but the close direction of being on stage wasn't something that he was interested in. There's a great film I think you should really check out as well called The Men from 1950, where it's his first screen role, and he's incredible in it as an injured soldier during the war. And it wasn't well paid. It was something to kind of see how he would do in a film. It was an incredible performance and really showed what he could do. Particularly when part of the film he's in a wheelchair. And again, it's his relationship with women, whether that is a dangerous one, or whether that is love, or whether that is confusion. There's a real sort of sexual chemistry with most of his co-stars. Best example of that possibly being Vivien Leigh's Blanche Dubois in A Streetcar Named Desire, Eva Marie Saint in On the Waterfront, where you've got the virginal religious nun. People think of and see the t-shirt and the rugged look and the sweat, and whether it's the cap in Wild One, these are almost automatically become posters. But as he grew older, he almost hid his looks and wanted to play different characters and try different things out. People talk about The Godfather as one of his last great roles. That's a really interesting role, but certainly because he changed his physicality, made himself look older, the famous cotton wool inside the mouth to change his physical looks, to change the way he talked. There's just more and more about Marlon Brando over the years that have become things of legend. But often it's the older, out of shape, or confused, or phoning it in performances. In a similar way to how James Dean is remembered as the way he died, Marlon Brando is remembered for his later life as well. And I think sometimes it's really important to go back and look at those wonderful films he did. Go back to 1954 and watch On the Waterfront. Terry Malloy is like, as he says, he's a bum, but he develops a conscience. He grows a conscience throughout the film and develops and finds moral strength to take on the mob. Anyone who's lived in an area where people do not tell or grass or inform or stool pigeons, or whatever you want to call it, on other people in the community, to turn that around and believably have it seem like he has the people on his side, but also the people in the audience on their side, is a fascinating and incredible performance. It's harder to have that kind of interest in Johnny in The Wild One. It's a little bit inconsequential as a film, but it's got the line, "Hey Johnny, what are you rebelling against?" And he's like, "What do you got?" That was really scary at the time. The idea of the teenager rebelling against anything, having no reason to behave the way they behaved, is actually quite scary for the establishment at the time. Sometimes roles were forced upon him due to contracts. This was the days of the big Hollywood system, such as playing Napoleon, which he didn't want to do. However, when he did, it was a technically wonderful performance in 1954. His performance as Napoleon was quite calm and placid compared to how other people have played Napoleon. And the interesting thing as well is that in Desiree in 1954, that film actually outgrossed On the Waterfront. Now, Guys and Dolls is another interesting one. The idea of Marlon Brando playing Sky Masterson in a musical alongside Frank Sinatra, it was almost, these days, it'd be a bit like a punk band suddenly going pop. Oh my word, it's so much fun. I'm not a person who's into musicals very much, but he's great as Sky Masterson. Guys and Dolls is one of the few musicals that I will go and rewatch, really enjoy it. He plays a blonde-haired Nazi in The Young Lions in 1958. This is, such a strange fluctuation between roles. As you can see on screen in 1961, this is Brando's directorial debut, One-Eyed Jacks. Stanley Kubrick actually backed out of directing this film, reasons that are unsure, and he was very meticulous but quite indecisive. Luckily, Carl Malden was there to help him out as well, who you may remember from On the Waterfront. Mutiny on the Bounty was a film where we realised that due to Marlon's personality, films could take a long time to make. The more voice he had, the more he made it heard. His personal life getting involved in the people he was meeting and the things he was doing. And once we got towards the 60s, absolute power to a certain degree, corrupted, absolutely. I do want to mention Apocalypse Now, an incredible cameo, really, and the idea of that character, possibly more scary in thought. Once Colonel Kurtz appears, Marlon Brando is in complete control of that film, making a great movie even greater. I don't need to tell you about Apocalypse Now and how wonderful that film is. So I've really focused on the golden era of Marlon Brando. Occasionally he would pop up in films throughout the 90s. The Score with Edward Norton, where he fell out famously with the director Frank Oz, only referring to him as the Muppet characters that Frank Oz had voiced. But I really wanted to focus on that golden age of Marlon Brando, golden age of one of the greatest, if not, in my opinion anyway, the greatest screen actor of all time. I do want to touch on 1978 Superman performance as Jor-El. Like I said, this was in 1978. The wise, white-haired father of Superman appearing at the beginning of the film, giving the film some gravitas. I think this is in his elder statesman sort of period. I haven't even mentioned some of the other films from the 70s, such as Last Tango in Paris, where we're talking about Marlon's midlife crisis alongside himself being able to be seen in a certain way on screen, in an uncomfortable, unashamed kind of way. And then a few years later, playing Jor-El in Superman, being this, wise father of Superman. Very strange leaps, influenced by money or influenced possibly left so by the craft at this stage. 1979, as I said, was Apocalypse Now, and that performance of Kurt's was wonderful. But again, documentaries and books say that the conferences between Francis Ford Coppola and Marlon Brando were legendary and very difficult. And this is where we're getting into the era where maybe the documentaries are more interesting and more engaging and realised than the actual films. So, like The Island of Dr. Moreau, the documentaries about those are legendary. Marlon would still pop up in the 90s in things such as The Freshman, giving a comic performance take on Don Corleone. For me, that golden era of Marlon Brando's acting, the greatest screen actor of all time in my eyes. If this small video makes you have a look at On the Waterfront or Guys and Dolls or Apocalypse Now and appreciate how incredible this guy was, then I've been really happy to do this. So thanks for watching. What's your favourite role of Marlon Brando? What's your favourite performance? What's your thoughts about him? Do you have any? Thanks for watching.
You get up, you big tumble guts.